UK is, outside of the US, the second biggest exporter of services. It's a service-driven economy. They tend to view New Zealand as producing a kind of higher quality product. And the bottom line is, you therefore need to be prepared to spend some meaningful time, I think, on the ground.
I'm Danny Parker from Web Antler, and here today I have Phillip Wood from the British New Zealand Business Association, which is quite a mouthful, I find sometimes. But yeah, if you can start off by telling us a little bit about the organisation and a little bit about your role as president as well.
Sure, I'll try and reduce the mouthful by calling it the BNZBA for the purposes of this conversation.
Yes.
Which is still a mouthful, but it's a little bit easier. So we've been around as an association for over 100 years, 1917, original founding. Interestingly, the mission really hasn't changed from the day one, which is promoting trade and business between the two countries. So it's kind of very much what it says on the tin, British New Zealand Business Association. That's what we do. It hasn't changed all that time. Obviously, the relationship between the two countries has gone through a whole evolution during that time, and we've kind of evolved with that. How do we do that? We run events. All being well, we run kind of some high quality events during the year. Here in Auckland, also in Christchurch, occasionally in Wellington. And through those, we provide information, we provide the opportunity for people to network, connect. And then outside of the events, we try and connect people. If we understand what the members are looking for, we try and connect them to other members, other organisations, either here or in the UK, to try and help their business. And that's what it's all about. And membership is companies, UK companies who are here, got business here, maybe exporting here, don't necessarily have a presence. New Zealand companies going the other way, may have a presence in the UK or exporting from here. And then companies who service all those. So law companies, accounting companies, marketing companies, all those people who help those people, those businesses kind of thrive. And that membership is primarily Auckland, which is a function obviously of the business and where we are as well. But some members in the UK, some members Christchurch, some people dotted around New Zealand. So it's not too bad in terms of spread. We're also a member of the British Chambers of Commerce network, and the British Chambers of Commerce has over 50 chambers across the UK. So that's a pretty big network covering businesses which employ about 6 million people in the UK. So that's a pretty, I don't think there's any other organisation in the UK that has that scale of coverage of the SME sector in the UK. And then internationally, we're kind of New Zealand representation, but they're in over 80 countries internationally. So actually, there's probably very few organisations in the corporate world or anywhere that have got coverage like that. So that can be useful to have access to those people and what they do. And my role is very much about just bringing this all together, creating a bit of value. For the members.
So traditionally there are a lot of New Zealand exporters, depending on which sector that you're in, but they do tend to kind of follow this path of Australia and then the US. You know, are there reasons why you think that people should be almost considering the UK first in amongst all of that?
Okay, I guess if you split exports between physical and services, if you like, because there's very different methodologies and markets, if you like. So fully understand why, if you're a physical exporter, meat, dairy, whatever it is, understand why Australia is the obvious market to start with. It's the nearest major market, same language, and also we're very familiar with each other. And we have the processes in place where people, goods, money moves freely as if we are one country, more or less. So, it's hard to compete with that, and the familiarity and the ease of getting there is a big sales pitch for Australia. Why would you look at the UK first? Well, I'd say either first or second. You may want to do Australia first. That makes perfect sense. Why would you look at the UK second? And obviously, I would argue this, but I mean, your alternatives are UK, EU, Asia, US. You could say those are broadly the four areas. Why does the UK why is it better, in my opinion, than those other regions, and does compete in some degree with Australia in some ways? One, obviously, familiarity. Kiwis, large number of Kiwis have done their OE in the UK. A lot of Kiwis still have family connections with the UK. You know, as you go back, parents, grandparents, you know, great grandparents still visit the UK because of that, have a familiarity. Plus, obviously, our culture and everything and our history means we are aligned in a lot of ways. So, familiarity is a big thing. So, you know, similar to Australia in that sense. Language, and sometimes my European counterparts don't like me saying this, but language is a huge benefit at the end of the day, because ultimately, if you're going to do business with the UK, people you're going to talk to there speak the same language. If you sign documentation, it's in the same language. If you want to take an office there, it's very easy to do. You're going to talk to people in the same language. Even down to labeling your product in English, marketing your product in English. Don't need to change your website. You can just give that information to people. It's there, and that's, as I say, you know, you can oversell that. Some people say, but I think it's hugely important for SMEs. They don't have the money or the resources to invest in. Well, if I've got to translate everything I produce and make sure it's correctly translated, if I've got to understand the local culture so I don't offend anybody or do anything, you know, that's a huge amount of time and effort. So, you know, those are both kind of where UK would compete with Australia. Regulation is very similar to here. You know, within reason, you can say if it complies with regulation here, it's probably going to comply with UK. Minor changes, obviously, because different countries, but within reason, and that's where the language also plays in. You can read the regulations, you can see where you comply. They can look at your labelling and go, yeah, that obviously complies. The other thing where the UK perhaps stands out from some of these other regions that I mentioned is there's 4 countries in the UK, obviously, and there is devolved parliament in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, but overall it's one country. If you go into a shop in London or Edinburgh, it's the same process. They pay the same tax. There are slight differences in each country, you know, but within reason, it's 99.9% the same country. Now, if you go to the US, you've got 50 states. With very different politics, tax systems. Yes. And, you know, so it's different. EU is obviously 27 different countries. Now, obviously, there's a lot of freedom of movement and all those good things, but and regulations are, you know, are more uniform. But there's still 27 countries, 27 tax regimes, 27 political systems, and obviously Asia's the same. So UK, smallest out of those 4 regions, obviously, but actually it doesn't matter where you are in the UK, your product will get sold in the same way. Services, I would say UK there has much stronger advantage over Australia. Because at the end of the day, it's size of market, location of market, access to skills. Distance isn't an issue now. Technology solves that problem. You don't have to ship anything. You don't have to worry about shipping or anything like that. You know, so in the services sector, and the UK is, outside of the US, the second biggest exporter of services. It's a service-driven economy. It's where, particularly professional services, it is the centre. Outside of the US, it's the next centre. So I think if you're a service exporter, and you know, you could say something like fintech. Well, London's a global financial centre. Outside of Silicon Valley, London's the next biggest fintech centre. You know, so that's where your market is. Health tech, you look at National Health Service in the UK, 1 million employees. Their total annual expenditure is New Zealand's GDP. So if you're in health tech, why wouldn't you try and get into the UK market? So I think those are all good reasons on the services side why you would say, hey, UK is an attractive market. I won't spend time in Australia. Why wouldn't I just go to the UK?
You sold it well. You know, it was good. It's great.
I passed the test.
So is there anything from the recent UK election result? Is it too early to tell, you know, that Kiwi businesses need to know about or consider from a trade perspective?
I mean, it obviously is early. I guess the biggest thing, and this, you know, we go back to the regions I mentioned just recently, is it's stability. I mean, the Labour Party got in such a massive majority, and obviously things can change, but you'd have to, well, they're certain to be in for 5 years. Keir Starmer will certainly be Prime Minister for 5 years unless something amazing happens. And you'd have to say that it's a high probability they'll be in for a further period after that with such a big majority. Not impossible to overturn it, but it's hard. That probably, as I say, compared to some of the other regions and recent events. You know, you mentioned, you know, people go Australia, US. Well, at the moment, you know, I would say US is not necessarily the market I'll be rushing into. Obviously, a lot of instability, a lot of uncertainty, definitely up to the election there, and probably afterwards. depending on what happens in the election. So, now you can say, well, at the individual state level, it's probably more easier to discern what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But there's still that element of uncertainty, and ultimately, depending on who gets elected and their view of international trade is, and America first, all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
There is an element of uncertainty. So similarly with the, EU, Asia, a whole spread of countries, a whole load of things going on in the EU. France is going through an election at the moment. It's probably not going as they would have thought 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Things like, so I guess the thing the UK is going for from this election is stability. You can kind of go without saying. And the Labour Party so far, the announcements it's made, are fairly central, fairly mainstream. The fear with the Labour Party used to be when Jeremy Corbyn was leader, it would be too left wing. That's kind of been removed to the moment anyway. People would say it's a fairly mainstream party. And so what has it made announcements on? Well, it's talked about the international trade side. I think they're not going to change in a major way. They've talked about the UK being closer to Europe, whereas the Tories were very anti that. Or certainly push that down the priorities. That could be of interest to Kiwi companies if they're in the UK or going to the UK. It may become easier to do things into Europe. They won't rejoin. They've said they won't rejoin. But anything that makes it easier to trade between the two regions must be of benefit. They've talked in the last stages of the Tory government. They kind of wound back, or certainly put on hold, some of the environmental stuff that was going on. Boris Johnson would be very pro kind of greening the economy. When he left as Prime Minister, that kind of slowed. The Labour Party is making much more noise about reviving that. So that might be, an area where that will change. And they've also talked about continuing the Conservative Party's policy of levelling up, which might be of interest to Kiwis in the sense of the idea of that is a lot of the wealth is in the southeast of England, around London and the surrounding area. And the Tory government wanted to level it out, so move more wealth into the regions. The Labour Party is even keener to do that. So, as a Kiwi company looking at the country, you might go, okay, what does that mean? And the way they're doing that, the initial way is obviously things like government departments are getting moved out of London. So you may find government departments, the tax department maybe in a city in the north or somewhere. So Manchester's getting quite a lot of stuff. So you might well look at Manchester and go, well, okay, if these kind of things are happening, then business will build around it.
My next thought was around, what are the sectors where there is that sort of potential for growth, or most potential for growth? And I mean, you even mentioned, I suppose, that greening of the economy as well, where there's, a lot of New Zealand companies which are coming out with different tech and I suppose, other solutions within that area as well.
I mean, the opportunities, you can't move away from the traditional ones, food and drink, which feeds into that green idea, because the perception of the UK consumer is that New Zealand is clean and green. They have visions of mountains, all that kind of greenery, which we have, but that's their vision of, vision of New Zealand. That's what it is. All the analysis that NZT and all those kind of people do confirms that. It also confirms they tend to view New Zealand as producing a kind of higher quality product. It's obviously a safe product, but it's a higher quality product. It's not a country associated with producing cheap and cheerful, kind of that kind of thing. So that's kind of, and that plays to the kind of green thing, which is, New Zealand's viewed as green, clean and green. If we're looking as a consumer to buy into that, which they are in the UK, then that kind of helps those mainstream products. And also we've got the free trade agreement, which was signed was signed a couple of years ago, went into force last year. And so all those kind of food products like honey, meat, dairy, wine had tariffs removed. So financially, there's a benefit. And I say that then goes alongside the clean and green, high quality product. I mean, the caveat with that is that you are competing with European countries who are nearer to the UK, so don't have to, they can compete perhaps a bit more on that side of things, and have a track record of producing high quality goods as well. Italy produces high quality clothing, food, all these kind of things. So if you can look at New Zealand produces that kind of stuff, but don't ignore the fact that there's plenty of other people who do as well. And the Brits have, for all that kind of image of being kind of little Englanders, are very open to kind of imported product. I would say far more open than a lot of countries actually. Something like agri-tech will get probably moved up the list, if you like. You know, if you're sitting there and you're selling an agri-tech product from here, people in the UK are going to go, yeah, well, of course you'd be strong at that. You know, that's, you know, so it comes back to what are they, in their simple way of looking at things, what do they associate with New Zealand? You know, agriculture. They know New Zealand agriculture is way ahead of the UK and Europe because doesn't been subsidised. You know, the UK can learn a lot from New Zealand. So if you turn to an agri-tech product from New Zealand, people are going to go, yeah, I'll give you some time. Fintech growing, but you know, there's still a case to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I was wondering as well is that obviously, you know, there's been the EU free trade agreement, and that's, I suppose, had a lot of publicity around it. Do you think that there is that wider awareness as well in the business community around the British free trade agreement?
I'd like to say there is. I think there is. I mean, I think.
Sorry, I highlighted the problem.
No, I mean, I think there is. I think the UK one. I mean, we held our first event post. I mean, as soon as Brexit happened, you could kind of tell there was going to have to be a change, right? And we held our first event. Brexit happened June 2016. That's when the vote was. July 2016, we held our first event. What are the implications of Brexit? And one of the things was, even by then, New Zealand had been identified as a priority country, right? And for a whole host of reasons. And then we spent like 5 years, or whatever, talking about it, because the UK didn't complete Brexit for 5 years. So you couldn't actually sit down and get very far. Then the trade agreement was negotiated very quickly, less than 18 months. You know, whereas the EU one, all that time was going along in the background, right? So the UK one, I think when it was announced over May 2023, when it went live, there was a lot of stuff around it. I think now the EU has kind of got the limelight. The challenge with all these things, and if you talk to MFAT, NZTE, they'll say the same thing, is, you know, there's a lot of announcement, and there's a lot of stuff around it. It doesn't really mean anything unless people are making dollars out of it. And you know, you can negotiate all the agreements you want, but if nobody's using them, it doesn't make any difference. You know, and this is I think one of the challenges to New Zealand government, the MFAT, NZTE, is how you get the value out of these. You know, you can stand up and say, well, we've got free trade agreements with 75% of our trading counterparties, but if you're not using them, it doesn't mean anything. You know, well done in negotiating it, but that doesn't get us anywhere. They're well on track for what they expect to happen. Like dairy wasn't in the UK, now it's in the UK. They say they're well on track. Target, they're hitting their targets. Nothing's going to happen overnight, but the sales are happening, the volumes are building up, products are going in across a whole range of things.
What are the key steps, you know, a New Zealand business should take, or at least be considering when entering the UK market for the first time?
Well, I mean, the first one is the basic for every business, isn't it? Validate the market. And then the next second one is revalidate the market. And obviously it's particularly important with the UK because it's a long way away. You know, and even services now, you know. You do need to understand the market. And bottom line is, you therefore need to be prepared to spend some meaningful time, I think, on the ground. You know, I don't think, you know, just flying in and out and thinking, oh, I've got a feel for it. You do need to spend some time there, which does cost money, you know, the bottom line. But I think as an SME or whatever, it's worth the investment because you do need to understand, you know, the geography is not the same. You know, the consumer in the centre of London is not the same as the consumer in Newcastle or, you know, in some small village in Cornwall. You know, it's not the same. So you need to understand that and understand where's your market. And as we were saying earlier, like levelling up might mean it's not in London. There's plenty of people there you can talk to, but ultimately you can't beat walking around the streets and going, well, what's on the shelves? What are people buying? What are people doing? And then business to business, walking around, well, what businesses are actually doing well in the UK, and talk to some, you know, go to the British Chambers of Commerce and go, well, who are your members and what are they doing? How are they, what challenges have they got? One of the things people say about the UK, the difference between UK and New Zealand, because it is a much bigger market, the process for doing business is a little bit different. It will take longer. And I think the idea you rock up and you go, here, I've got this wonderful product, and off we go, it probably isn't going to happen. I think if you talk to most Kiwi businesses who've been successful, it goes through a lengthy, it takes a lot longer. Firstly, you won't have that closeness of where in New Zealand you walk into a meeting, you almost certainly know someone or they know someone, they went to school with your brother, they got drunk with your sister at university, whatever it is, you know, there's some kind of connection that you find, you know. In the UK that probably won't happen. to the same, nothing like that. You know, you may find a connection, but it's much less likely to happen.
Yeah.
Certainly if you're talking to the bigger businesses, they will have a much longer process to go through.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can go out and get very friendly reception from them, and they'll be very friendly. They'll chat about the Black Caps, they'll chat about the All Blacks, all that kind of good stuff. But you have to bear in mind, there's a large number of other people they're also talking to about, you know, and there's a process they have to go through because of that. And you may have a great product, but there's someone else who's going to call on the next day also with a great product, you know, and so they'll have a process around it, and they'll take a long while, and it'll go through a decision-making process. And I think sometimes Kiwis can get a bit frustrated with that. Kind of initial meeting seems great, and then everything kind of dies, and everything goes slow, and they can't understand, you know, and then, but it is just don't give up, but also expect that it's going to take time. I think if you talk to most Kiwi businesses being successful, it's taken them a while. You have to talk to a lot of different people, and you know, you'll get referred up the line. You know, and that's just a process of being in a bigger economy. Absolutely. Where there is a lot of competition, and where people aren't just going to go, oh yeah, okay, that sounds great. Let's try it. And that's, I think that is important. Is the scale of things. Particularly the bigger companies. I mean, if you talk to a supermarket or someone with a food and drink product, I mean, New Zealand government can help you get in, and we can help. You know, we can get people in the door. But it may be a long while, and they will investigate your product, and they will, you know, they will do all that due diligence before they put it on the shelf. You know, if you take scale, London's got 33 boroughs. I think it's 33. Croydon, I think, is the biggest, 400,000 people. So that's the size of Wellington. So you could say, well, I'd like to get my products out in Wellington, or you could say, I'd like to get it in the borough of Croydon. You know, it's comparable population-wise. So, you know, think about that. And that's, I mean, you only get that when you're on the ground. You know, or you may go for, say, Manchester, you know, 1.5 million people, you know, bigger than Auckland, you know. So you might just want to go to Manchester and say, let's just focus on Manchester. I don't need to be anywhere else.
I think that's an interesting point. I think, often when people think about, say, going into the US or somewhere like that, it's, you know, it's not trying to go to the whole US all at once. It's trying to find where you can fit, and I suppose the same applies to the UK.
And the UK is very compact. In a day, it's what geographic area is smaller than New Zealand. And it's pretty well connected for all the complaints about transport. You know, people always moan about transport, but actually, it's pretty well connected.
Do some New Zealand businesses almost not get a shock, but there's possibly they've had a look at it with rose-tinted glasses of, you know, when I was here 20 years ago doing my OE, and it was amazing. I know this place, but you know, 20 years ago was very different to now.
Certainly, I think when I first got involved with the BNZBA, which was 2005, that was a very common response. Why would I need any help? You know, and you know, to be honest, you know, that time the focus in New Zealand was very much on Asia, China in particular, right? And obviously, I obviously need help there because I don't speak the language, don't understand the market. Well, I need help. And then you go, well, what about the UK? You go, well, I just talked to, I've spent 5 years there doing OE. I know people there, I can get it done. But you're right, people then realise actually, you could get it done, but it may not be the most efficient way of getting it done. You know, and when you live there and you flatted with 5 other Kiwis 20 years ago, it's not the same as it is now. And you get a lull in, if you go there, you go, oh yeah, everything's exactly where it was. You know, the geography doesn't change. The geography of London doesn't really change. You know, oh yeah, I'm in the West End, I got this Covent Garden, it's, you know, but what's there is different. The business being done is very different. The way it's being done is different. Everything's moved on. So you do need help.
So what resources and support does the BNZBA offer for people that are wanting to go into the UK? So you mentioned, I found that very interesting, around the British Chambers of Commerce that are there. Was it 50?
50 in the UK,
50 in the UK.
So I mean, two key areas I guess that we like to help people with, or help people via, is one is connecting. So I was talking about, so can we connect them to someone in the UK? Now that may be a Chamber of Commerce, it may be someone else who we worked with, it may be one of our members. We've got some members in the UK. It may be government, someone related to government or something, you know, that because we obviously work with New Zealand government here, but also the UK government. So there may well be just simple connections that you can make.
Yep.
We also have connections into the Kiwi network there.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of Kiwi groups, and there's a new one just sprung up very recently, Kiwis in STEM.
Okay.
You know, so Kiwis are in those kind of engineering, tech, you know, quite high, you know, high tech kind of areas. But that's, you know, so we've just kind of made some connections with them. So those kind of connections can help people. SMEs, I mean, I'm focusing on SMEs here. If you're the Fonterras of the world, you've got your own resources you can throw at these things, and you know, and you'll get a lot more government support. If you're an SME, those connections, and as we know, you know, those connections are critical for the smaller business. And it's all about meeting someone who can help your business, and you know, you can obviously all the research, all the service, you know, all the legal accounting, all that kind of stuff is important. But ultimately, it's meeting some people who can go, I can help you with that, or I know someone who can help you with that. The other thing is just information. I mean, you've been to some of our events. You know, somewhere in those events, depending on which events you come to, our events kind of cover from general business to some specific stuff about the UK. You know, we did one about trading in the UK, where we had a tech business and a honey business talking about how they got into the UK, what they'd done, how they got on. So there's some, you know, people go, well, that was useful information. And you can pick it up, you can Google, you can get all that stuff. But sometimes hearing it from the person who's done it is more meaningful. And you kind of remember it, and you kind of go, oh, that was a very interesting point, you know, that answered my question or something that I've been worrying about. So I think that connections and information are the two ways we can help. You know, the event we did, as they talk about trading with the UK, one of the speakers talked about, you know, you need to kiss a lot of frogs. You know, before you meet your prince, which was quite an interesting comment, and I think really does apply to places like the UK. You know, you're very unlikely to hit first time you meet someone and immediately they're going to transform your business and make it all easy. But so, you know, go to New Zealand government, go to people like us, talk to the Kiwi networks, talk to people like you guys, you know, talk to those kind of the whole range of people, and somewhere in all of that, you will kind of pull together, something will, you know, click, and you go, oh, that person there. But if you go very narrow, so I think as a small business here, and I know it's time consuming and it costs a little bit of money, you know, join us as a membership fee, but it's worth the investment, because somewhere across all of that, I think you will get the contacts you need, and I think for SMEs in particular, that can make a big difference.
So do you see that there's any emerging trends in the UK that New Zealand businesses should be aware of, or should know about, or could even capitalise on as well?
What are the trends? Online retailing is huge in the UK. I know it is here, you know, but it's growing very rapidly in the UK. And that's changing the high street in the UK, and there's some challenges around that. But I can't remember the numbers now, but it's one of the fastest growing countries for online retailing. I think something like 30-odd%, 35, 40% of sales are now done online in the UK. And that's a pretty big percentage, right? And I think something like over 80% penetration. So, you know, so that's an important thing to bear in mind. Apparently click and collect is very big in the UK. You know, so right, you know, but you know, Amazon, when you look at Amazon, you know, US obviously, UK is the next place where they normally trial stuff. So you want something in 2 hours, you know, they try it out in London. You know, because it's the kind of place where you can do that. You know, it's very compact. So, you know, online retailing, I think one of the big things in the UK, and they're probably further up the curve than New Zealand on this, is kind of environmental and ethical purchasing. So I think number there is around 70% of people say, depending on the product, but they will give that a consideration. And that is quite important there. So their perception of New Zealand is important in that sense. So, you know, ethically, probably we come out high. Environmentally, we probably come out high, but then things like air, you know, the mileage can be a challenge. And I know the New Zealand government spends a lot of time and money trying to explain how, even though it comes a long way from New Zealand, perhaps a food product is more environmentally friendly than from something produced actually in the UK. It's quite an interesting, but you know, that's a hard one. You've got to correct people's perception. You know, so I think the environmental and ethical thing is big in the UK, and I think from what I'm hearing, one of the challenges is that certainly the bigger organisations are much more demanding about proving it. So if I'm going to put it on my shelf and you say it's environmentally friendly, we'll demonstrate how it is environmentally friendly. Where did it come from? How, you know, they're probably more demanding than we are here. We're kind of going that route, but I think they're further down that path. And whether that's the consumer driving that, or whether the consumer's being driven by the kind of the business, I don't know, but it's certainly a feature.
Yeah.
And they will drill down, and it's no good just saying, well, we're from New Zealand, we're clean and green, and we're environmentally friendly. Yeah. They will go, we'll demonstrate that. Yeah. And that's increasingly
having those systems in place.
Having the system in place to demonstrate it, an accurate system, which is a challenge here in New Zealand, where we're a small business community. Interestingly, that say if you took food and drink, that's one of the things you do to understand some of the trends. Meat eating in the UK is declining, and I think something like 20% of people in the UK don't eat meat. That's a meaningful percentage, and it's growing quite quickly. So, and certainly, I think I saw last year there was less meat eaten than there ever has been in the UK since records began. Now, if you think about it, the population's growing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And yet meat eating is declining. Now, that may be that's an interesting one. Alcohol consumption, I think something, but similarly, about 20% of people in the UK don't drink alcohol, and that's growing. And interestingly, that's growing in particular in the younger people, age group, which means that's going to follow through. Yeah. So if 18 to 24-year-olds are not drinking alcohol, well, they're going to not going to suddenly start drinking alcohol at 35. No. Very unlikely.
So that's going to follow through. Euros, it would have been.
But it's an interesting thing to think about. Now, having said that, people say, but what they may not be drinking as much, but what are they spending their money on? Yes. So and it may be you can get a bigger share of a smaller market.
How do you sort of foresee, I suppose, after that event the other week, the CPTPP?
Oh yeah.
Aside from maybe adding more letters in the acronym, how do you see that, or the trade relationship between UK and New Zealand kind of evolving? I suppose, as you mentioned before, very early on when it comes to the UK election. And
that's I guess that's probably the least in some ways. Let's not have a major. I don't think it'd be very unlikely to have a major influence. In some ways, it's things outside the UK that could drive things. I'm saying, US, goes crazy, and suddenly people go, well, UK looks as an English-speaking country, looks a fairly stable, good place to go. But then other things in the world could, so in some ways, there's other things in the world could, why are the UK and the EU trade agreements important? Well, maybe because China isn't necessarily the only solution for New Zealand. It's a major part of our trade policy, which came out of the CPTPP event we did, was, China's important, but the rest of the world is also important, and we have to have that diversification of risk. So, UK, I think, will remain high on the priorities for the New Zealand government, which keeps its profile there. I think the trade relationship, it's already grown. I think the UK is one of the, if not one of the fastest growing overseas markets, actually, in the last year, because of that free trade agreement, because products like dairy are suddenly going in there. So it's one of the fastest growing markets. So, that's good news. And the more product goes in, the more your profile gets raised, the easier it becomes to do stuff. So I guess that should grow. I don't think it's never going to go ballistic, right? But it should grow. No reason in the current environment. And there is a lot of talk, as we know, about trading with your friends, and that came out of CPTPP. Increasingly countries are looking to trade with people who are friendly to them, share the values, because there's less chance of a major shock happening. Yeah.
So what's the final piece of advice that you give to New Zealand businesses that are looking at the UK?
I do think that that kiss a lot of frogs is quite a good one, actually. Yeah. Because it is a large market. Yeah. There's a lot of opportunities, and you may need to talk to a lot of different people there to find where the real opportunity is. Yeah. You may need to talk to a lot of people here to find out who the best people are to help you exploit that opportunity.
How do people who are interested in the UK, how do they connect with the BNZBA?
Right, that's easy. That's the easy bit of this interview. Well, obviously we have a website, www.bnzba.co.nz. That's, you go on there, we've got a contact thing there. LinkedIn pages. I'm on LinkedIn. My details are on the web page.
Yes.
You can track me down easily. People do on a regular basis. We put nearly all of our events, unless they're private for some reason, will be on our LinkedIn page.
Yeah.
And they're normally open to the public to come along. You know, just, it's not as a member. Then come along. Let us know you're coming along. We'll introduce you to some people. So, and we hold events every month. We've got 2 events coming up on trade in August, which will be interesting. You know.
Yeah.
So I would say, have a look at our LinkedIn. Have a look at our website.
Yes.
Contact me, and off we go.
Great. Okay, well, appreciate you coming in today and talking about the UK with us and the BNZBA.
Yeah, pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No, thanks very much. Thanks for being a member.
Yes.
Thank you. Should make sure get that in. No, I mean I mean you've been to events. Hopefully you found them useful.
Yeah. No,
and I think that's an example of how we can work with people. And it's not all about I've set something up in the UK or I've set it's general, just helping business. Yeah. And the UK will feature in that somewhere maybe, but it's not. It's about meeting people and doing things.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.